everyone, my name is Josh and welcome to WHIMS, and today I'm going to take you back inside number 9 with the episode Riddle of the Sphinx from season 3. And this episode tells the story of a student who is by the name of Nina Nunar going into the chambers of a well-known university lecturer and professor by the name of Nigel Squires, played by Steve Pemberton, in the attempt of figuring out what the crossword is in order to basically impress her boyfriend Simon, who is actually very clever. He studies at Oxford and all these other things. So what kind of starts off as a very kind of interesting breaking and entering story turns into a bit of a play on sort of like this student and mentor relationship. So they basically spend the afternoon or the evening of this very stormy night basically just trying to solve these puzzles and try to figure out how to solve this cryptic crossword. And of course he's a crossword setter, so of course he has a pseudonym. And in the case of Nigel Squires, he has the pseudonym the Sphinx, which comes from Greek mythology, where it's a creature that has the face of a woman on a lion's body and the wings of a phoenix. And she would pose a riddle to travellers entering Thebes, a riddle, and if they get the riddle wrong, they will be asphyxiated, strangled by the Sphinx, and then she will eat the remains. And that's a very important detail that I want you guys to keep in mind for the duration of this episode, and I want to make it very clear that I will be going in depth in these videos for Riddle of the Sphinx. So if you are a fan of Inside Number 9, please leave me your thoughts about this episode down in the comments. What did you think of this episode? Did you enjoy it? Did you think it was dark? Did you think it was funny? I definitely thought it was both, because this show does something really wonderful in the sense that, and I think this goes for all of Steve Pemberton and all of Reece Shearsmith's work, is that they really do a very good job of really kind of walking that tightrope between being very dark and being very funny. And I think that's something that they really do very well. And this episode is no exception. But I really do like this episode for two reasons. One, it's very dark and it's very funny, but also there's another reason that sort of slips in. It's all about puzzles, and I love a good puzzle. I love a good, cryptic puzzle. I love a good riddle. That's why on my community page for a while I did write my own riddles to kind of, show to you guys to get right and all the rest of it. So I do love a good puzzle, I do love a good riddle. So this episode was way up my alley more than usual with Inside Number 9, because I really do love a good puzzle. I love a good Dan Brown novel, I love a good brain teaser and all the rest of it. I was a huge fan of the Professor Layton games when they were coming out on Nintendo DS. I just loved them. I really loved, solving puzzles and solving riddles. And this episode is really wonderful. I love the clues for all the cryptic crosswords as well. I love the one where the easiest one to think about is when Nina is given the question, to cover why it sounds almost like a 50 Cent song. Because it basically, if you break it down, to cover is basically a word, it is basically something called a homophone, which is if you have something like there, and then you have something like there, it's basically two words that sound the same, but they're spelt differently, like there and there, or Y being an anagram for the letter Y or the word Y. So in the case of to cover is basically a homophone for a word that's also a type of song, beginning with W. And of course, the other clue is, of course, the word's 50 Cent. What's 50 Cent known for? He's known for rapping, so of course the word is rap. That's one clue out of many that Nigel Squires gives Nina to solve these riddles. But what's very interesting is as these puzzles are being unravelled, all these different things are coming to light. Let's say, for example, Nigel Squires says, so Simon studies under Mr. Prue, studies under Professor Prue from architecture or whatever, and he goes, how's he doing with that? And she goes, he likes him. And he goes, I meant Mrs. Prue from architectural department. And she goes, he likes her. And he goes, you do realise that these are characters from the sitcom Heidi High. And it really is kind of wonderful how he can just make up these little clues to sort of, trick her into doing all these different things. And of course, Nina isn't actually called Nina. We find out that she's actually called Charlotte later on in the story. But I really do like that. I love the twists and turns, and I love how it goes from this very light-hearted solving of puzzles, almost like a Dan Brown novel or a Professor Layton puzzle, where you are kind of almost relaxed and you're kind of, almost thinking you can almost do it with a cup of tea or like a biscuit or something like that. It really does feel like very good comfort viewing kind of television. But then it very slowly starts to creep into the gothic and the disturbing with all these different revelations, like the fact that Nina, or Charlotte, appears to be not all that clever at first. Like, she calls things, like, say, for example, there's a line where he goes, oh, there's a line called an anagram indicator. It means we can jumble up the words. And when she's solving another riddle and she's asking this question, she goes, is this another anagram? Like, she calls it an anagram instead of an anagram. It's actually really funny. But then, very quickly, something happens to Hector and she begins to, get very worried. She asks him to drink some tea, and then she gets the question, a person has consumed a tiny amount, why it's enough to take one's breath away. And then she starts to unravel, and then her Welsh accent slips and she starts to talk a little bit more sophisticated, like she's an educated person at Oxford or whatever. And then it very quickly becomes clear that she knows a little bit more than she's letting on. It turns out that she's actually a little bit more cleverer than what meets the eye. And I really do like that twist, because you're kind of thinking to yourself, why is your accent changed? But then I know from playing Bioshock that when a person's accent changes, that can't be a good sign. Or when an accent's not really that good, you can usually really tell. But that's not because the actor's bad, it's because it's intentionally done so that you can go, oh, this clearly is meant to be kind of like a twist. But what's very interesting is that it is very clever. And I really do like this episode because it gets so dark very quickly. I absolutely think that the scene where Charlotte, aka Nina, is basically confessing to Nigel that Simon was in fact her brother and not her boyfriend, who went into the Cambridge crossword competition, the CCC, for those of you who are interested in acronyms, much like the KKK, only slightly less benevolent. And it's actually a very funny little joke there, but I really do love these little reveals. Like, I like the fact that she says, well, oh, do you know what he did afterwards? You challenged him on a word, and he said that it was this word, but then the old boys network stuck up for you. And you know what he did? Do you know what he did, you pathetic old man? He went to his room, took off his belt, and hung himself. And then Nigel Hector Squires is pretending to be kind of catatonic, and he goes, I'm afraid that's incorrect, Miss Noonar. Our portraits are hung, people are hanged. Hanged, that's the correct conjugation for which you have my deepest sympathies. And she goes, what the fuck, you're supposed to be dead? And he goes, on the contrary, I'm very much alive. It's you who are dead. And I have to say this about Steve Pemberton. He is amazing. I love his characters, the way he plays certain characters. Sometimes he can play certain characters quite often and more often than usual. But whenever I hear his posh, intellectual character voice, I love it, because he really does show off how, sophisticated he is and how clever he is. But he is just really funny as well. Like, I like the fact that he basically, he's essentially, the Rex Harrelson to Miss Noonar's or Charlotte's, Audrey Hepburn. Like it's like almost like a twisted version of My Fair Lady, where they're kind of, teaching her how to speak proper and speak good English ish and things like that. And she's meant to be this cockney person who says, oh, it's all right, Gabner, and things like that. And it's very almost like a very twisted version of My Fair Lady almost, and it's really well done. And they even do a little reference to that by saying that, oh, excellent, by Jove, she's got it, and things like that. Like, I really do love the twisted elements of this episode. But it gets worse, because it turns out when Nina, Noonar, or Charlotte is confessing to her real intentions behind this actual meeting, Nigel Hector Squires reveals that he's actually all right when he finds out that Nina has actually slipped a substance called tetrodotoxin into his drink, and that's from a pufferfish. And if it's actually ingested, say through a cup of tea, it will start to melt down the internal organs, starting with the diaphragm, leading to eventual paralysis and death. So she thinks that he's very slowly dying, but in reality, It's actually Charlotte who's the one who's dying, because Mr. Hector Squires saw through her plan and he swapped cups. And I really do like the fact that they use the crossword to kind of reveal these little details. And it's almost like, but there's something that happens later on in this episode that I actually think is quite interesting, because it turns out that when Charlotte, aka Nina, is trying to make herself sick after she finds out that she's basically ingested the toxin, Nigel goes to the phone. He says, "It's me, your services will soon be required." And then it's revealed that Tyler, who is the mentor of Nina, she studies marine biology, hence the pufferfish reference. When he tells her about a plan, she's shocked and confused, and he goes, "Oh, we go back a long way, Tyler and I." And then they start doing the crossword. And then there's this very uncomfortable scene where Nigel Hector Squires comes on to Charlotte, aka Nina. That's very uncomfortable for several reasons, and I will definitely say why that is later on in the episode. But what I think is very awful is the fact that he wanted to do that in the first place. It just makes me feel icky, and it makes me go, this very light-hearted crossword play, and then all of a sudden it goes into very twisted, almost very uncomfortable territory soon afterwards, and it really is quite horrible to watch. But what's very interesting is that when Nigel leaves the room, Tyler comes in, and he's played by Shearsmith, and he starts playing the crossword, and he starts having fun, and then he talks to her. They talk for a little bit, and he says, "Oh, well, it's horrible what's happened to her. Like, she's ingested some tetrodotoxin, like she'll eventually, die from paralysis. So, diaphragm is starting to shut down. Everything is, starting to shut down. She's very slowly losing consciousness." And he goes, "Well, don't feel too sorry for her. That's what she wanted to do to me, remember?" And then he goes, "Well, go on then. Give her the antidote." And then, he goes, "Oh, there is no antidote." And he goes, "What?" And he goes, "Tetrodotoxin poisoning is very severe." And she goes, "He needs a stomach pumped and, an intravenous strip, and she needs all that done very quickly, otherwise she'll die." And he goes, "Well, shit, let's do it then." And he goes, "Oh, I'm afraid we can't do that because I want you to eat her." And as comes forth with the Sphinx legend, because his name's the Sphinx, he calls it, he has to, eat his conquest in order to call himself the Sphinx, to give himself the true victor. And this is where the episode gets really twisted, because it turns out that, again, spoiler alert for the entirety of the episode, if you don't want to have this episode spoiled for you, please go watch it on iPlayer, or if you have a copy of the DVDs, please go watch it as part of Series 3. I think it's it's the second episode of Series 3. So it's an amazing episode. Any episode is kind of like a gateway into this show. But I think what's really great about this episode is it is really good if you love a good brain teaser. But what's very good about this episode too is the revelations and the twists and turns. There's almost a twist per page, almost, with every single development of the story, with every single development of the crossword. We get little twists and turns here and there, and that's what I really love. So they keep using that device of using the crossword as sort of like a basis for these revelations. And when it's revealed that Tyler has basically covered up the fact that, oh yeah, this is basically a confession where a girl is found in your rooms at number 9 with a wrapped in her underslip, in the left in the swamplands, and cups were swapped and things like that. Like there's all these different clues to a potential murder investigation, and posting this in the local newspaper will be classic psychopathic behaviour. So in order to do that, he has to basically because Tyler has something on Nigel Hector Squires, he has to do exactly what he says. So he says, "Well, I'm going to make sure that you eat a little bit of her, or she will die and you will rot in prison. And I will be none the wiser, because then I will be far away from here." But then he has the chance to basically have a little chat. He says to Nigel, "Talk to Nina before she dies." And he goes, well, me and Tyler were at university, and we were very good friends, and we had, this very good time, solving things together. And then he got married to someone. He had a very close relationship with this woman, and then her and Nigel had an affair, which led to the eventual breaking up of their relationship and the eventual birth of a son named Simon that, she had, the wife had on her own, but Mr. Tyler ended up having to raise them by himself once she died. But then there's another little revelation after he forces Nigel to eat a bit of Nina. There's another little revelation that, you see, Simon isn't exactly my son, neither is Nina. They're in fact yours, Mr. Nigel Hector Squires. And he goes, well, I've got one last gift for you, Mr. Squires. And he puts a bullet on the table and he says, you know what Chekhov said, Mr. Anton Chekhov said, if you show a gun in Act 1, make sure it goes off by Act 3, otherwise the audience will feel cheated. And I think Reece Shearsmith does such a good performance as his character because he says something when he's revealing his revelations. It's insane what the unhinged mind is capable of, isn't it? And it's really it reminds me almost like, this feels like Inside Number 9's answer to the film Old Boy, which is essentially a Korean film made in 2003 about a man who essentially is locked up for 15 years and he has no idea why he is locked up. He just knows that he's wronged someone and he needs to figure out why. But when he gets released from prison after 15 years, he is released under the guise of mass hypnosis. But not only that, but he's also driven by the urge to kill. He wants to kill whoever locked him up, whoever put him in prison, and he just goes basically on a killing spree. But there's a bit of a twist to Old Boy, and it's quite twisted and quite almost icky, just as icky as this, in fact. But I feel like if you've seen Old Boy, you definitely can probably figure out what's going on with this episode. Please don't tell me you guys have seen the American version. The Korean version is the right one to see, because that one's a much better story. It's a much more tightly written script. But yeah, this episode is fantastic. I love the little gags. Like I love the lines. Like I love the line, what's black and white and red all over? Oh, it's the Cambridge crossword competition. And he goes, or a nun chewing a razor blade, or a penguin with sunburn. And, oh, I've got another one, but it's quite rude. And then he goes to Nina, I teach Catullus, dear, I'm hardly a prude. And she goes, what's long and hard and full of semen? And she goes, a submarine. And he goes, oh, what's bright and pink in the morning? And she goes, a cock. And he goes, the Financial Times crossword, about to sip his tea. And it's really funny. I love this episode for the humour. And I love when he gets another question ready. Like he's like writing, to wound and wander meaning destitute. And she just goes, oh, for fuck's sake. Hearing her say those words in her Welsh accent makes it even funnier, because I always think of the show Gavin and Stacey, where there's a lot of Welsh characters in that, and I can almost imagine them saying those words. It's just really hilarious. But I love this episode. It's so twisted, but I love it. It's one of my favourites of Series 3, along with Diddle Diddle Dumpling. I think both this and Diddle Diddle Dumpling are some of my favourites of Series 3. But it's a really great episode. I would highly recommend starting off with this one, in fact, because it really is definitely a very twisted episode. But it's one of those episodes where I feel like if you've watched it multiple times, it rewards you with repeat viewings, because there's so many different twists and turns to the crossword and how it's presented. And the fact that I just want to ask one big question with this particular episode before I sign off on this video. Nigel knows... No, sorry, not Nigel. Tyler knows Squires so well that when he tells Nina of the plans to eventually poison him, it's almost like Tyler set it up so that, Nigel would do the crossword for the murder investigation, because it's almost like he knew that it's playing to his vanity to do the crossword, because he knows his expertise is the crossword competition and using words and being playful and creative, and every word is chosen for its letters. he says at one point. So he almost, you know, delights and relishes in the idea of playing with his food almost. And that's something that's actually quite predatory about Nigel Hector Squires. And of course, there's something otherwise predatory about him in the scene where he actually tries to come on to Nina, which is, again, rather uncomfortable. But what I think is really upsetting is that he really does kind of relish in destroying people. He says, they even make a remark that, oh yeah, Nina says, oh, you must have quite the devious mind. And he goes, it has been said. And there's even a moment where she goes, oh, it is satisfying, isn't it? And he goes, it is. And it's like, would it be satisfying if you were basically ruining someone's life to do this? And in many ways, it's almost like he now gets the chance to experience what Simon went through, and he almost gets the chance to experience what Tyler went through. And of course, the satisfaction of winning immediately gets turned on to Tyler, where he now feels the satisfaction of beating him through the crossword. So he actually does a very good job of really kind of making everything. It does a very good job of tightening up everything. And it really is a very clever episode. Honestly, let me know what you think of this episode in the comments, because I really just love this episode. It's fabulous, it's wonderful. And let me know what you think of this video overall. Did you like it? If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more, please subscribe for more content, more Inside Number 9 content. And I will be unravelling very soon after Series 9 airs or premieres what my next TV show will be. So look forward to that, and I'll even give you guys a chance to vote. I'll give a few options on my community page, and let me know what new TV series you want me to tackle in the comments once Inside Number 9 is done. But I will still be coming back to Inside Number 9. I'm not finished with Inside Number 9 yet. After Season 9, I'm not finished with Inside Number 9 yet. So we'll still have Inside Number 9 content, but I will be unravelling a new series very soon. But let me know what you think. All the best. I hope you're all doing very well. This has been Josh with WHIMS. Take care. Bye for now.